There comes a quiet moment in every life, sometimes whispered in the stillness before sleep, sometimes announced through exhaustion or heartbreak, when the soul leans forward and asks a question the mind cannot answer. What if I have been holding on to something that was never meant to be carried? Not a thing you can point to, not a person you can name, but a way of seeing, a posture of the heart, a habit of believing that life must bend in order for you to be at peace. And in that moment, if you listen closely, you will feel a gentle invitation, not to fight harder or strive more aggressively, but to soften, to loosen your grip, to allow something ancient and wise within you to step forward and say, you can rest now. Most of our suffering does not come from what happens to us. It comes from the stories we insist on telling about what happens to us. It comes from the illusions we mistake for truth, the belief that we are separate, that we are lacking, that our worth must be earned, that happiness is somewhere ahead, just beyond the next achievement, the next approval, the next victory. These illusions feel solid because they have been rehearsed for so long. They feel familiar because they were learned early, absorbed quietly, from a world that taught us to measure ourselves against one another, to fear loss, to cling to certainty, to control outcomes as if life were a negotiation rather than a living, breathing mystery. And yet, beneath all of that conditioning, beneath the noise of expectation and comparison, there is something in you that has never been damaged, never been diminished, never been in need of improvement. There is an awareness within you that simply is watching the drama of the world with calm curiosity, knowing without effort that you belong. This awareness does not rush, it does not demand, it does not cling. It observes, and in observing, it understands. This is the part of you that knows the truth, that letting go is not a loss, but a return. We cling because we are afraid. We cling to relationships, identities, roles, beliefs, outcomes, because we have been taught subtly and persistently that without them we will disappear, that without control we will be unsafe, that without certainty we will fall apart. But notice something quietly revolutionary. Everything you have ever truly needed to survive a difficult moment has already arisen within you. The breath has come back. The heart has continued to beat. The sun has risen again. Life has carried you again and again, even when your mind was convinced it could not. Letting go, then, is not about abandoning responsibility or withdrawing from life. It is about releasing the illusion that you were ever meant to micromanage the universe. It is about trusting that there is an intelligence moving through you and around you that does not require your attention to function. When you stop gripping the wheel so tightly, you discover that the road has always known where it is going. The ego will resist this truth. The ego thrives on control because control gives it a sense of importance. The ego says, if I am not managing this, I am nothing. It says, if I let go, something terrible will happen. But the ego is not who you are. It is something you experience. It is a collection of thoughts, habits, memories, and fears that have been mistaken for identity. When you observe it, instead of obeying it, its power softens. When you stop arguing with life, the ego loses its primary fuel, resistance. You begin to notice how often your pain is fueled not by reality, but by your refusal to accept reality as it is. You replay conversations that are over. You resist moments that have already arrived. You argue with facts. You wish the past had unfolded differently, or you demand that the future behave according to your preferences. And in doing so, you miss the only place where peace has ever existed, right here, right now, exactly as this moment is. The present moment does not ask you to fix it. It asks you to inhabit it. It asks you to bring your attention fully into what is, without the commentary, without the judgment, without the constant internal negotiation. When you do this, even briefly, you may feel a subtle shift, a quiet easing as though something heavy has been set down. That heaviness was never life itself. It was your resistance to life. Letting go is the willingness to stop insisting that life should be different in order for you to be whole. It is the understanding that peace is not a reward granted after conditions improve. It is a choice made regardless of conditions. This does not mean you stop growing or creating or dreaming. It means your sense of worth and safety is no longer held hostage by outcomes. You act from inspiration rather than fear, from alignment rather than desperation. When you let go of attachment to how things should be, you open yourself to how they are. And in that openness, something extraordinary happens. you become available to grace. Solutions arise without force. Insights arrive without struggle. Relationships soften. You find yourself responding rather than reacting, listening rather than defending, allowing rather than controlling. Life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a conversation, one in which you are finally listening. Forgiveness naturally follows this letting go, not as a moral obligation, but as an act of self-liberation. You forgive not because others deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Holding resentment is like gripping a burning coal with the intention of throwing it later. The only one being burned is you. When you release resentment, you are not condoning harm. You are refusing to carry it any longer. You are choosing freedom over familiarity. As you let go of the need to be right, the need to be validated, the need to be in control, you begin to sense a deeper identity emerging, one that is not threatened by disagreement, not diminished by loss, not inflated by praise. This identity is rooted in being rather than having, in presence rather than performance. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are connected to something vast and benevolent, something that cannot be taken away. You realize then that happiness has never been hiding in a future scenario. It has been waiting patiently in the space between your thoughts, in the pauses you rush past, in the moments you label as ordinary. When the mind stops chasing, the heart remembers. It remembers how to appreciate without possessing, how to love without clinging, how to trust without guarantees. Letting go does not make you passive, it makes you powerful in a way the ego never could. You become responsive instead of reactive, creative instead of compulsive, compassionate instead of defensive. You stop asking, what can I get from this moment? And begin asking, what can I bring to this moment? And paradoxically, when you stop grasping, life seems to offer more. There is a profound freedom in realizing that you do not need to prove your worth. You do not need to earn your right to exist. You do not need to control every outcome to be safe. You are already enough, not because you have achieved something, but because you are an expression of life itself. The same intelligence that moves the stars and grows the trees is breathing through you right now. You do not need to strain to be worthy of it. You already are. As you continue to release illusions about who you are, about what you need, about how life must unfold, you may notice moments of fear arise. This is natural. The ego fears dissolution. When fear appears, meet it with kindness rather than judgment. Say to yourself, this too can be allowed. Fear softens when it is not resisted. It loses its grip when it is met with awareness instead of panic. Over time, letting go becomes less of an effort and more of a way of being. You notice when you are tightening, when you are gripping, when you are arguing with reality, and you gently return to the breath, to the body, to the present. You remember that you are not here to dominate life, but to participate in it. You are not here to conquer the moment, but to experience it. And in this experience, something deeply healing unfolds. The nervous system relaxes. The heart opens. The mind quiets. You begin to feel supported rather than alone, guided rather than lost. You sense that life is not happening to you, but for you, unfolding in ways that the limited perspective of the ego could never fully predict or control. This is the freedom of letting go, not a dramatic renunciation, not an escape from responsibility, but a subtle, courageous willingness to trust. Trust that you are held, trust that you are guided, trust that you can meet each moment as it arrives with openness rather than resistance, with curiosity rather than fear. When you live this way, peace is no longer fragile. It is not dependent on perfect circumstances or constant success. It becomes a quiet undercurrent, steady and reliable, flowing beneath the changing surface of life. You still feel joy and sadness, gain and loss, connection and separation, but you are no longer defined by them. You move through them with grace, knowing they are visitors, not rulers. And perhaps the deepest realization of all is this: you were never meant to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You were meant to experience it, to learn from it, to love within it, and then to release it again and again, moment by moment. In letting go, you do not lose yourself. You find yourself whole, present, and free, living beyond illusions, anchored in a peace that has been within you all along. And as you continue walking this quieter path, you may begin to notice something subtle yet profoundly reassuring. Life does not collapse when you stop forcing it. The sky does not fall when you stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. The world does not abandon you when you step out of the exhausting role of constant vigilance. Instead, something gentler takes over. A rhythm you did not invent begins to carry you. You start to feel that you are being lived by life itself, rather than struggling to live life correctly. This is where true trust is born, not as a concept, not as a belief you repeat to calm yourself, but as an embodied knowing. Trust arises when you see, again and again, that the moment meets you when you meet it, that you do not need to pre-suffer in order to prepare. That clarity often comes after action, not before it. The soul does not ask for guarantees, it asks for presence. It asks you to show up with sincerity, with openness, with a willingness to be guided rather than driven. When you let go of the demand to know how everything will unfold, you give life permission to surprise you. You begin to see that uncertainty is not a threat, but a doorway. It is the space in which creativity breathes, where intuition can speak without being interrupted by fear. The unknown becomes less of an enemy and more of a collaborator, inviting you into experiences that the small, anxious mind could never have planned. There is a tenderness that emerges here, a softness toward yourself and others. You stop measuring your progress against invisible standards. You stop asking whether you are ahead or behind. You begin to sense that life is not a race with checkpoints, but a landscape to be explored. Some days are wide and luminous. Others are quiet and inward. None of them are mistakes. Each carries its own intelligence, its own invitation. You may notice that compassion deepens naturally when you are no longer defending an identity. Without the need to protect an image of who you think you are, you become more available to who others actually are. You listen more fully. You judge less quickly. You recognize familiar fears moving through different faces. And in that recognition, separation softens. You realize that much of what you once took personally was never personal at all. It was simply the echo of unmet needs, old wounds, and unexamined beliefs passing through human form. This is where service replaces struggle. Not service as self-sacrifice, but service as expression. You give because giving feels like alignment, not obligation. You contribute because it is natural to let what flows into you flow outward again. Like a river that does not cling to its water, you discover that abundance increases when circulation is allowed. What you withhold stagnates. What you trust moves. There is also a deep humility in letting go, an understanding that you do not need to be the author of everything in your life. You are a participant in something vast, intelligent, and deeply benevolent. This humility does not diminish you, it frees you. It releases you from the burden of omnipotence, from the quiet arrogance of believing that everything rests on your shoulders. You begin to rest into cooperation with life rather than competition against it. As this way of being settles in, the inner dialogue softens. The mind becomes a useful instrument rather than a relentless narrator. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer dominate. They pass like clouds across a wide sky of awareness. In the space between them, you feel yourself more clearly, not as a role, not as a history, not as a collection of achievements or regrets, but as a living presence, alert and at ease. You start to understand that peace is not the absence of movement, but the absence of resistance to movement. Life continues to change, to ask things of you, to stretch you into new forms. But you are no longer bracing against it. You bend where bending is needed. You stand firm where integrity calls for it. And you trust yourself to know the difference, not through overthinking, but through listening. This listening is a sacred act. It requires patience. It requires silence. It asks you to turn down the volume of external demands so you can hear the quieter guidance within. And when you do, you may find that the voice of the soul does not shout. It does not argue. It simply points gently, persistently, toward what feels expansive, honest, and alive. There is a joy that arises here that is not dependent on excitement, a contentment that does not need applause, a sense of belonging that is not tied to being chosen or approved. You belong because you are here, because you are breathing, because you are part of the same unfolding that moves through every form of life. Nothing extra is required. And so you continue not with rigid certainty, but with open-hearted curiosity. You allow life to reveal itself one moment at a time. You let go of the fantasy that control will bring safety, and you discover instead that presence brings peace. You stop living as if something essential is missing, and you begin living from the quiet truth that nothing ever was. This is the deeper freedom, living beyond illusions, beyond fear, beyond the endless chase for completion. It is the freedom of being fully here, fully alive, and gently unattached to outcomes. A freedom that does not need to be defended. A freedom that simply is waiting patiently for you to notice that it has always been your natural state. And as this freedom settles more deeply into your way of being, you may notice a quiet courage awakening within you, a courage that does not announce itself, that does not posture or prove, but simply stands present when life asks something real of you. This courage is born not from certainty, but from surrender. It comes from knowing that whatever arises, you will meet it as you are, not as who you think you should be. You stop armoring yourself against possibility, and instead, you allow yourself to be touched by it. You begin to see how much energy was once spent resisting emotions, pushing away sadness, clinging to joy, fearing uncertainty, avoiding discomfort, and now something has shifted. Feelings are allowed to move through you like weather across an open field. You no longer mistake them for identity. You do not say, "I am broken." You say, "Something tender is moving through me." You do not say, "I am afraid." You say, "Fear is visiting, and I can remain present with it." In this spaciousness, emotions complete themselves. They arrive, deliver their message, and leave. Nothing needs to be suppressed. Nothing needs to be dramatized. This is how healing actually happens, not through force or analysis alone, but through permission. Through the radical acceptance of what is arising without the added violence of judgment. When you stop fighting your inner life, it stops fighting you. The body relaxes, the heart opens. The mind learns to trust silence again. And in that trust, an old wisdom resurfaces, the wisdom that knows you were never meant to be flawless, only whole. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means inclusion. It means allowing every part of yourself a seat at the table, the confident and the uncertain, the joyful and the grieving, the part that knows and the part that is still learning. Nothing is exiled. Nothing is rejected. And in this inclusion, the need to control dissolves even further, because control is always born from fear of what we refuse to face. You may find that your relationship with time itself begins to soften. The urgency that once drove you eases. You are no longer chasing moments or trying to outrun them. The past loosens its grip because it no longer defines you, and the future loses its intimidation because you trust yourself to meet it when it arrives. Time becomes a companion rather than a taskmaster. Each moment stands complete in itself, not as a stepping stone to somewhere else, but as a place where life is fully occurring. From this place, intention replaces expectation. You move through the world guided by inner alignment rather than rigid plans. You set directions, but you release demands. You act with clarity, but you remain flexible. You understand that the deeper intelligence of life may reroute you not to punish you, but to bring you closer to what actually serves your growth. Detours become teachers. Delays become invitations. Endings become openings. There is a quiet intimacy with life that develops here. You notice beauty in ordinary places. You feel gratitude without effort. You sense connection not as an idea, but as a lived experience. The boundary between inner and outer softens. What you once sought externally, peace, meaning, belonging, you recognize as qualities that emerge naturally when you are no longer at war with yourself. And so you live with lighter hands. You hold relationships with love rather than possession. You pursue goals with passion rather than desperation. You express yourself without the constant fear of misunderstanding. You speak when truth calls, and you rest when silence feels right. You trust that you do not need to grasp at life to participate fully in it. This is not a withdrawal from the world, it is a deeper engagement with it. You are present without being entangled, involved without being consumed, alive without being overwhelmed. You understand now that freedom was never about escaping responsibility or avoiding pain. It was about releasing the illusion that you needed to be someone else, somewhere else, or further along to be at peace. And in this understanding, something sacred becomes clear. Letting go is not a single act, but a living practice, a moment-by-moment choice to return to what is real. To loosen the grip when you notice it tightening, To remember, gently and repeatedly, that life does not need your resistance to be meaningful. You walk forward now not as someone who has figured everything out, but as someone who trusts the unfolding. And that trust becomes your anchor, not fixed, not rigid, but steady. You are held by something larger than your fears, something wiser than your plans. And in surrendering to that truth, you discover that the freedom you were searching for was never ahead of you. It was waiting in the quiet willingness to finally let go. And as this understanding settles into the marrow of your being, there is nothing left to chase, nothing left to fix, nothing left to prove. The movement now is inward and outward at the same time, like breath, receiving, releasing, trusting the rhythm without trying to command it. You feel the simplicity of being alive, not as a concept to analyze, but as a lived intimacy with each unfolding second. Life is no longer something you are preparing for, it is something you are finally inhabiting. You begin to recognize the sacredness of this ordinariness, the way light enters a room, the way silence speaks between words, the way your breath arrives faithfully without instruction. These are not small things. They are reminders. Each one whispers the same truth. You are already participating in the miracle you once thought you needed to earn. Nothing is missing. Nothing has gone wrong. There is a tenderness in this realization, a humility that does not diminish you, but places you exactly where you belong within the great movement of life, neither above it nor beneath it. You feel gratitude not because everything is perfect, but because everything is real. You are no longer bargaining with the present moment. You are meeting it, and in meeting it, you are met. The old impulse to control may still visit from time to time, like an echo from a former life. When it does, you do not scold it. You smile softly and let it pass. You remember that peace is not something you must defend. It is something you allow. An allowance requires nothing more than your willingness to stay open, to stay present, to stay kind toward yourself as you move through this ever-changing landscape. You trust now that even when clarity is absent, guidance is not. Even when answers do not appear, wisdom is still unfolding. Life does not withhold itself from you. It reveals itself in layers, in timing, in ways that honor your readiness rather than your impatience. And you honor that process by no longer forcing outcomes, by no longer demanding certainty before you move. What remains is a gentle strength, a steadiness that comes from alignment rather than effort. You live with intention, but without attachment. You love deeply, but without possession. You care fully, but without fear of loss. You have learned that true security does not come from holding tightly, but from knowing you can let go and still be whole. And so you walk on, lighter than before, not because life has become predictable, but because you have become present. The illusions have loosened their grip. The need to control has softened. The belief that happiness lives somewhere else has dissolved. What remains is awareness, quiet, expansive, and free. This is the freedom of letting go. Not an ending, but a beginning that renews itself in every breath. A way of living that trusts the unseen, honors the moment, and rests in the knowing that you are guided, supported, and complete. Right here, right now, just as you are. There is a gentle truth whispering beneath all the noise of your life, a truth that has never raised its voice, never competed with your worries, never argued with your fears, and yet has always been present, patiently waiting for you to notice it. It says to you now, not as a command, not as a demand, but as an invitation born of love. You do not need to stress. You were never meant to live clenched inside your own mind, gripping life as if it might slip away the moment you loosen your hold. Stress is not strength. Tension is not control. Worry is not wisdom. They are habits of forgetting who you really are. When you are stressed, you are leaning into a belief that the universe is unsafe, that life is hostile, that everything depends on your constant vigilance. Stress is the body's way of saying, I think I'm alone in this, and the quiet voice of the divine responds again and again, you never were. But that voice does not shout over your racing thoughts. It does not interrupt your mental rehearsals of what could go wrong. It waits for stillness, because stillness is the language through which guidance flows. You see, guidance does not arrive through panic. Insight does not emerge from pressure. The next right step is rarely revealed when you are mentally pacing the room of your fears. Divine intelligence moves with elegance, with simplicity, with calm certainty. It moves like breath, like gravity, like the turning of seasons. And when you stress, You close the door to that movement, not because you are punished, but because you are distracted. You are listening to the voice of urgency instead of the voice of truth. Take a moment now and notice what stress feels like inside you. Not the story behind it, not the justification for it, but the sensation itself. The tight jaw, the shallow breath, the shoulders lifted as if bracing for impact. Stress is a contraction, a pulling inward, a forgetting of the vastness that holds you. Faith, on the other hand, is an exhale. It is not blind optimism or denial of difficulty. It is the deep knowing that even in difficulty, you are carried. Faith is the recognition that the same intelligence that beats your heart without your permission is also orchestrating your life beyond your understanding. There is something profoundly healing that happens when you stop arguing with the moment you are in. Stress is an argument with reality. It says, this shouldn't be happening, or I can't handle this, or I need this to be different right now. And every argument with what is creates friction inside your soul. But when you soften, when you breathe, when you allow the moment to be exactly as it is without labeling it as a mistake, a subtle shift occurs. You begin to feel supported rather than attacked by life. This is not about passivity. It is about alignment. When you stop stressing, you are not giving up responsibility. You are giving up resistance. You are stepping out of the illusion that you must carry the weight of the world on your nervous system. You are remembering that you are a channel, not the source. The river does not stress about reaching the ocean. It flows, and the destination takes care of itself. In the same way, your life is not asking you to force outcomes, but to cooperate with the intelligence already moving through you. There is a sacred paradox here that the ego struggles to understand. The more you try to control everything, the less peace you feel, and the more you release your grip, the more clarity arrives. This is not coincidence. This is design. The ego believes that tension equals safety, that vigilance equals power, that worry is a form of love. But the soul knows otherwise. The soul knows that love is trust, that power is presence, that safety is not found in predicting every possible future, but in resting in the awareness that whatever unfolds, you will be guided through it. God speaks the loudest when you are quiet inside. Not because God prefers silence, but because silence is the state in which you can hear. Guidance is always broadcasting, but stress is static. Worry is interference. When your mind is racing, you are tuned to the wrong frequency. When you slow down, when you breathe deeply, when you release the need to know everything right now, you begin to receive insights that feel less like thoughts and more like recognitions. They arrive as calm certainty. They arrive as gentle nudges. They arrive as a sense of, this feels right, rather than a frantic, what if? You may have noticed this before in small moments. When you stopped trying so hard, the answer came. When you let go of forcing a decision, clarity emerged. When you finally relaxed, the solution appeared effortlessly. These are not accidents. They are reminders. Reminders that stress is not the doorway to progress. Surrender is. And surrender, in its truest form, is not weakness. It is alignment with a wisdom far greater than the thinking mind. There is a part of you that already knows how to live without stress. It is the part of you that existed before you learned to worry, before you learned to measure your worth by outcomes, before you learned to believe that love must be earned through struggle. This part of you is not impressed by chaos. It is not intimidated by uncertainty. It knows that life unfolds exactly as it needs to for your growth, even when the path is not immediately clear. Stress often arises from the belief that something essential is missing, that you are behind, that you should be further along, that you are not enough as you are right now. And yet the truth is quietly radical. You are already enough. Not when you fix everything, not when you figure it all out. Now, in this breath, in this imperfect, unfolding moment, when you accept this, not intellectually but experientially, the nervous system relaxes, the body softens, the heart opens. And in that openness, guidance flows naturally. Healing begins within, not as an act of effort, but as an act of allowance. You do not heal by fighting yourself into peace. You heal by stopping the inner war. You heal by noticing how often you push yourself, criticize yourself, pressure yourself to be different than you are. Stress is often self-directed violence masquerading as motivation. It is the belief that you must be harsh with yourself to survive. But love has never required force. Transformation does not come from tension, it comes from compassion. Imagine what would happen if you treated yourself with the same gentleness you would offer a frightened child. You would not shout at them to calm down. You would not demand that they have all the answers. You would sit with them. You would reassure them. You would remind them that they are safe. In doing so, you would regulate their nervous system, not by logic, but by presence. This is exactly what the divine presence does for you when you allow it in. It does not scold you for worrying. It simply waits for you to soften enough to feel held. When you stop stressing, you create space. And space is sacred. Space is where insight enters. Space is where intuition whispers. Space is where miracles feel ordinary. The mind wants to fill every gap with planning, predicting, and protecting. But the soul thrives in openness, in the pause between thoughts, in the breath between breaths, in the moment when you admit, I don't know, and that's okay. There are no justified resentments, because resentment is stress stored in the heart. It is the refusal to let life move forward. It is the belief that peace must wait until the past is corrected. But the past cannot be corrected. It can only be released. Forgiveness is not about condoning what hurt you. It is about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying it. And when you forgive, when you truly let go, the body relaxes, the mind clears, and guidance rushes in like fresh air into a sealed room. Forgiveness is the path to freedom because it dissolves the inner tension that blocks love. And love is not sentimental, it is intelligent. Love knows how to guide. Love knows how to heal. Love knows how to lead you step by step, moment by moment, into a life that feels aligned rather than forced. When you forgive, you are not losing anything. You are reclaiming yourself. Change your thoughts, and you change your life. Not because positive thinking manipulates reality, but because your thoughts determine what you are available to receive. A stressed mind is closed. A peaceful mind is open. An open mind notices opportunities that a tense mind overlooks. An open heart senses timing that a fearful heart mistrusts. When you change your inner climate from pressure to presence, the outer landscape responds in ways that often feel miraculous, though they are simply natural. You are not your ego. The ego thrives on urgency, comparison, and control. It believes that if it relaxes, everything will fall apart. But you are not that voice. You are the awareness that hears it. You are the stillness beneath it. You are the field in which thoughts arise and dissolve. And the moment you identify with the observer rather than the noise, stress begins to lose its grip. You no longer need to silence the mind, you simply stop obeying it. Living in the now is not a spiritual slogan. It is a physiological necessity. Stress always lives in the future or the past. Peace lives here. Right now, in this breath, you are okay. Right now, you are alive. Right now, nothing is required of you except presence. And when you anchor yourself here, guidance does not feel distant or mysterious. It feels intimate. It feels personal. It feels like a quiet confidence that says, take this step, and then, now this one. The soul always knows. It knows when to rest. It knows when to act. It knows when to speak and when to wait. But it cannot guide you if you are constantly overriding it with fear. Stress is often the refusal to listen. Faith is the willingness to trust what you sense rather than what you fear. And trust is not built by forcing certainty. It is built by noticing how often you have been carried through moments you once thought would break you. You are a divine being having a human experience, not a human being desperately trying to earn divine support. Support is not conditional. It is not withdrawn when you make mistakes. It is not delayed until you are calm enough to deserve it. It is constant. But you must be receptive. And receptivity requires softness. It requires humility. It requires the courage to stop pushing and start allowing. So breathe now, not as a technique, but as a remembrance. Each breath is proof that you are sustained. Each exhale is permission to let go. You do not have to solve your entire life in this moment. You only have to stop fighting it. And in that surrender, something remarkable happens. The noise fades, the body relaxes, the heart opens, and in the quiet that follows, guidance emerges, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a gentle knowing. Stress closes the door. Faith opens it. And faith is not the absence of fear, but the decision not to let fear lead. When you choose faith, you choose alignment. You choose peace. You choose to trust that even when you cannot see the whole path, the next step will be revealed. And it will be revealed not through tension, but through stillness. Remember this, you are not here to suffer your way into worthiness. You are here to remember who you are. You are here to live from the inside out. You are here to let life move through you rather than against you. And every time you stop stressing, every time you soften your thoughts, every time you choose presence over panic, you open yourself to a guidance that has never left you. Be quiet inside, not by force, but by kindness. Let the storm settle. Let the waters clear. And you will see that you were never abandoned, never unsupported, never alone. You were simply listening to the wrong voice. Now listen to the one that speaks in peace. And as you listen now, not with your ears, but with the quiet center of your being, notice how something within you is already responding. There is a subtle loosening, a gentle recognition, as if an inner knot you forgot you were carrying has begun to untie itself. This is not imagination. This is remembrance. The body remembers peace. The soul remembers trust. You are not learning something new. You are returning to something ancient within you. There is a rhythm to life that cannot be hurried without consequence. When you rush, when you press, when you demand answers before their season, you move out of sync with that rhythm. Stress is often the sound of being out of tune with your own nature. And nature never strains. The stars do not rush across the sky. The seed does not panic underground. Everything unfolds according to an intelligence that does not consult fear. When you align with that intelligence, effort becomes graceful and action flows without force. You may have believed that your stress was proof of your commitment, that your worry showed how deeply you cared, but caring does not require suffering. Love does not need anxiety to validate its sincerity. In truth, stress clouds the very wisdom you need to care effectively. When your mind is tight, your vision narrows. When your heart is guarded, your intuition quiets. Peace is